Have you ever wondered why a man only begins to understand the value of a woman once she has already walked away? Why the silence of her absence cuts deeper than all the noise of her presence? The truth is simple, yet merciless. Detachment is the most dangerous feminine power, and men, proud as they are, often realize this power far too late. CarlJung would call it the confrontation with shadow, the sudden recognition that what was once dismissed, ignored, or taken for granted now becomes the haunting that shapes a man's nights and days. When she detaches, it is not always with anger, nor with drama. Often, it is quiet. It is the kind of quiet that terrifies because it speaks not of temporary distance, but of something far more permanent. A woman's detachment is rarely impulsive. It is born from slow erosion, from wounds ignored, from countless moments when her presence was undervalued. She does not wake up one morning and withdraw. No, her soul has been retreating long before her body finally follows. And when she chooses detachment, she does so not as punishment, but as liberation. The man left behind is often blind to this transformation until it is irreversible. He mistakes her silence for a tactic, believing she will return when he calls. He imagines her distance is temporary, a test he can outlast. But the reality is far darker. Once a woman detaches from her core, once her emotional bond severs, she does not return to the cage she escaped. The door may remain open, but she has already grown wings. And here lies the paradox. It is in her detachment that he begins to feel the very intensity he ignored when she was near. Her absence awakens his longing. Her silence forces him to hear his own emptiness. Suddenly, the little things he once overlooked become monumental in memory. The curve of her laugh, the light in her eyes, the warmth of her presence. What was ordinary now becomes irreplaceable, because desire always burns brightest for what is lost. Seneca once wrote that, "We do not appreciate what is ours until it escapes us." And nowhere is this more painfully true than in the space between a man's regret and a woman's detachment. The reason detachment holds such dark power is that it strips away illusion. While she is still present, he can convince himself that her love will always remain, that no matter how carelessly he treats her, she will stay. He projects his ego outward, believing her devotion is permanent. But detachment shatters that illusion. Suddenly, he must confront the fragility of love, the truth that connection is not guaranteed but chosen, again and again. And when she stops choosing him, his shadow emerges. This shadow whispers the words he has always feared. You are not indispensable. You are not the center. You are not in control. Jung described the shadow as the part of the psyche most hidden from ourselves. And in these moments, men are forced to face theirs without preparation. That is why regret is so heavy. It is not only the loss of her, but the loss of the man he believed himself to be in her eyes. He thought he was admired, desired, secure. But her detachment reveals a different truth. He was mistaken. To you, the woman listening, know this. Detachment is not cruelty. It is clarity. It is the recognition that your worth does not depend on being chosen, that your value does not rise or fall with his attention. When you step back, when you refuse to beg, when you withdraw your energy, you are not punishing him. You are reclaiming yourself. Your silence becomes your shield. Your distance becomes your sanctuary. And though he may rage, though he may regret, though he may drown in longing, none of that binds you anymore. The feminine soul was never meant to exist in chains. It was never meant to contort itself for scraps of affection. Detachment is not bitterness. It is freedom. It is the sacred act of saying, I will not betray myself to keep you comfortable. And it is this act that ignites the deepest regret in men, for they realize too late that they lost not a woman dependent on them, but a woman sovereign in herself. And here is the unspoken truth. Men do not regret the women who chase them. They do not regret the women who beg, plead, or compromise their essence to remain. No, they regret the ones who walk away in silence, whose absence feels like a wound that never fully heals. These women do not leave fragments. They leave echoes, haunting reminders of what could have been, of what he failed to value. And this echo follows him long after she is gone, whispering in his shadow, "Too late, too late." When a woman detaches, she does not simply leave a man, she leaves the reflection he once relied on. For in her presence, he found a mirror, an unspoken confirmation of his importance. She was the silent witness to his victories, the patient ear to his frustrations, the living proof that he was desired and significant. But when her detachment arrives, that mirror shatters. He is forced to see himself without the soft glow of her devotion. And it is here that regret roots itself most deeply, for he realizes how much of his identity depended upon her recognition. Jung reminds us that every relationship is an alchemy of projections. A man does not see a woman as she is. He sees her as the vessel of his anima, the carrier of his unintegrated feminine. Through her, he tastes tenderness, acceptance, emotional depth, qualities he cannot yet claim within himself. This is why her detachment feels like death. It is not only her absence he mourns, it is the collapse of the inner world she awakened in him. Without her presence, he feels exiled from the very softness he longed for but never cultivated within. Detachment confronts him with the truth of his own emptiness. The jokes no longer land the same way. The victories feel hollow without someone to witness them. Even the silence of the night takes on a new density, pressing against him with the weight of all he never said. Regret begins to whisper through the cracks of his consciousness. Why didn't you listen? Why did you assume she would stay? Why did you mistake her patience for permanence? These whispers grow into shadows that follow him everywhere, surfacing in memory, in dreams, in the quiet spaces of solitude. And yet, the woman who detaches does not linger in the same torment. For her, detachment is rebirth. It is the shedding of a weight she carried for too long, the release of a bond that demanded too much and gave too little. She walks not away from him, but toward herself, toward the silence that heals, the solitude that restores, the freedom that reminds her she was never defined by his validation. This is the paradox he cannot understand. While he drowns in regret, she rises in peace. The dark power of detachment lies precisely here. It is not an act of revenge, but of sovereignty. It says, I choose myself over the illusion of love that diminishes me. It is the same wisdom that Marcus Aurelius carried when he wrote, You have power over your mind, not outside events. A detached woman embodies this stoic truth. She ceases to wrestle with what she cannot control, the man's words, his choices, his blindness. Instead, she turns inward, claiming mastery over her own soul. And this shift terrifies him more than any argument ever could. For a man can fight with anger, he can dismiss tears, he can endure accusations. But he cannot fight silence rooted in certainty. He cannot bargain with a woman who no longer needs him. He cannot control what is already let go. Her detachment is untouchable because it is not about him at all. It is about her. And that realization is unbearable. Consider how many men return too late, seeking to rekindle what detachment has already extinguished. They send messages into the void, write apologies months or years after the damage is done, speak of change and awakening. But it is never about her. It is about their own regret. They return not out of love, but out of the ache of losing the mirror that once confirmed their significance. And the detached woman, seeing clearly now, knows this. She knows the difference between love and possession, between regret and recognition. And because she knows, she no longer yields. To you, the woman who has walked away, understand this truth. His regret is not your responsibility. His awakening is not your burden to carry. You are not obligated to return simply because he finally sees what he once ignored. His journey is his own. Yours is to remain free, to remain whole, to remain rooted in the self you reclaimed. The greatest act of power is not in making him suffer, but in refusing to bind yourself to his suffering. And this is what makes detachment the most feared feminine power. It does not destroy. It liberates. It does not punish. It reveals. It reveals the truth of who he is without her. and the truth of who she becomes without him. For the man, this revelation is regret. For the woman, it is resurrection. There is a moment every man remembers with a shiver of recognition, the instant he realizes she no longer waits. Her silence no longer feels like a plea, but a verdict. Her absence no longer trembles with hope of return, but settles with finality. This is the moment when the male psyche confronts its greatest wound, the loss of what it once took for granted. And in Jungian terms, it is nothing less than a confrontation with the shadow. For the man, the shadow emerges as regret, heavy, corrosive, relentless. He replays scenes in his mind, not as they were, but as they might have been. The time he brushed off her words, the night he dismissed her tears, the countless small ways he showed her she mattered less than his pride. Each memory returns, sharpened now by absence. What once seemed trivial reveals itself as fatal. He begins to see that the death of love is rarely sudden. It is the slow accumulation of unhealed wounds, the silent erosion of presence. Jung taught that the unconscious compensates for what the ego refuses to see, and so, the more a man ignored her worth in life, the more her absence magnifies it after she has gone. This is the cruel symmetry of regret. Only when she has withdrawn does he finally see the depth of her giving, the softness she offered, the sanctuary she created. But it is too late, for detachment closes doors that no apology can reopen. And yet, for the woman, detachment is not born from coldness. It is born from clarity. She sees at last the truth behind the mask, that his love was conditional, that his attention was scattered, that his promises dissolved when tested. She does not hate him. Hate would still tie her to his orbit. Instead, she releases him with indifference. And this indifference wounds him far more than anger ever could, for anger still implies investment. Indifference is the absence of all currency. Here lies the paradox. The more he chases after her shadow, the further she slips into light. His regret feeds on the past, while her detachment creates a future. He longs to rewind. She chooses to evolve. This divergence cannot be bridged, because they no longer inhabit the same psychological plane. He is bound to what was. She is free to what will be. The ancients understood this power well. Seneca wrote, "He who needs riches least enjoys riches most." The same is true in love. She who needs him least becomes the most irresistible. Detachment is not a performance. It is the natural radiance of a woman who has reclaimed her worth. She does not need to prove, to demand, to persuade. She simply withdraws. And in that silence, she becomes a figure of mystery, of power, of untouchable grace. This mystery torments him. Men are conditioned to chase what they cannot easily possess, and yet the chase against detachment is doomed. For the chase presumes she waits, but she no longer does. He mistakes her stillness for invitation, not realizing it is closure. He mistakes her new life for longing, not seeing that she has already crossed the threshold into a self-sufficient world he cannot enter. And so, regret consumes him like a phantom lover, fumes him. He imagines her voice in moments of solitude, remembers her laughter in rooms where she no longer exists, dreams of her hand on his shoulder when he feels most alone. This is the punishment not of her cruelty, but of his blindness. A man does not regret losing the woman he thought she was. He regrets losing the woman she actually became once she no longer needed him. To the woman who listens, let this be your reminder. Your detachment is not weakness. It is not a failure to love, nor a mark of bitterness. It is the highest act of fidelity to yourself. It is the decision to stop feeding a bond that starves you. It is the quiet but unyielding affirmation, "My soul is too sacred to beg for scraps." And when you embody this truth, you step into an archetype that transcends romance. You become the sovereign, the woman who governs her own kingdom of self. Men may come and go, lovers may rise and fall, but your throne remains. And the man who once thought you would wait forever will discover, too late, that he was only ever a visitor in the empire of your spirit. There comes a stage when her detachment no longer feels like a choice, It becomes her very essence. She no longer measures her days by his texts or his silences, no longer waits for validation like a thirsty flower craving rain. Instead, she grows roots deep within herself. This transformation unsettles him because it reveals a truth the male ego often cannot bear. He was never the source of her strength, only the mirror she temporarily allowed to reflect it. In Jung's language, individuation is the process by which a person integrates the fragmented parts of the psyche into a unified whole. For a woman, detachment often marks the beginning of individuation. She withdraws her energy from the endless dance of pleasing and proving and turns it inward. In that inward turn, she finds both the shadow and the self. The shadow whispers of her old fears: fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough, fear of losing love. But in facing these shadows, she dismantles them. She discovers that abandonment is survivable, that worth is not contingent, that love is not diminished by its absence, but purified by its return to source. This evolution terrifies him because it dismantles the script he has relied upon. He believed she would stay, even through neglect. He believed her patience was infinite, her softness inexhaustible. But now he sees she has boundaries, and boundaries terrify men who live off unconscious entitlement. The truth is, most men only begin to understand a woman's value once they encounter the silence of her boundaries. And that silence is louder than any scream. Regret for him becomes a teacher, but a brutal one. It shows him not only the woman he lost, but the man he failed to become in her presence. He realizes he did not meet her with depth, that he allowed comfort and ego to replace reverence. He recalls every moment she offered him grace and how casually he dismissed it. Now he sees grace for what it was, a gift, not a guarantee. And when gifts are squandered, they do not return. For her, detachment is not revenge. Revenge still circles around him. Detachment leaves the orbit entirely. She is no longer the wounded girl trying to convince a man to stay. She is the woman who recognizes that his leaving was not her wound, but her liberation. She does not need to close the door dramatically. The door simply ceases to exist. This disappearance terrifies him because he cannot fight what no longer stands before him. Epictetus once wrote, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." Transpose this to the realm of love, and the wisdom is profound. Freedom consists not in having many admirers, but in needing none. A detached woman embodies this stoic principle. She does not reject love, but she is not enslaved by it. She welcomes connection when it is genuine, but she no longer clings when it is absent. Her worth is not up for negotiation. The irony is that this very detachment often makes her more magnetic than ever before. Men who once ignored her now wonder what secret she carries. They feel the shift in her aura, an energy no longer pleading, but self-contained. Mystery radiates from her, not because she hides, but because she no longer performs. She lives in her own rhythm, and those who approach must adapt to it, not the other way around. This inversion unsettles men who believed she would always bend to them, and so the regret deepens. He scrolls through old photographs, reads over past conversations, senses her presence in places she no longer inhabits. Each fragment cuts sharper than the last. He begins to understand that her detachment was not sudden. It was the culmination of years of unnoticed sacrifice. She gave, and he did not see. She waited, and he did not arrive. She forgave, and he did not change. Until finally, the well ran dry. But for her, this dryness is not emptiness, it is clarity. She no longer confuses loneliness with lack. She no longer confuses desire with dependence. She no longer confuses silence with weakness. Her detachment is her sanctuary, a place where no man's negligence can disturb her peace. In Jungian terms, she has withdrawn her anima projection from him, reclaiming her own light instead of letting it flicker inside a man incapable of carrying it. She walks now with the serenity of one who has chosen herself. And while he wrestles with regret, she no longer looks back. His late awakening cannot disturb her dawn. There is a sacred stillness that comes when a woman no longer seeks her reflection in the eyes of a man. She does not abandon love, she transcends the hunger for it. This is the highest form of detachment, not coldness, not bitterness, but the calm certainty that her worth was never bound to anyone's recognition. In this space, her spirit becomes untouchable. She carries herself with the quiet power of someone who no longer negotiates with her own value. Men rarely understand this until it is too late. For them, regret arrives like an echo, haunting, delayed, unrelenting. They realize too late that the silence they once dismissed has become eternal. They recognize, often with anguish, that the woman they believed would always wait has stepped beyond their reach. But in truth, his regret is no longer her concern. It belongs to him, just as her healing belongs to her. Jung spoke of individuation as the journey toward wholeness, and this is precisely what her detachment grants her. Wholeness without condition. She is no longer fractured by longing or defined by absence. The masculine within her aligns with the feminine. The anima and animus no longer projected outward, but integrated within. This is why her energy feels complete. She does not chase, because she already contains. Detachment is not the absence of feeling, it is the mastery of it. She can love deeply without being consumed. She can desire without losing herself. She can give without collapsing. This equilibrium confuses men who equate love with sacrifice, but it liberates her from the endless cycle of proving and pleasing. She now knows love can only be sacred if it is free, and freedom is what terrifies the man who regrets. Because freedom means he no longer has power over her. He cannot provoke her with silence, cannot lure her with crumbs, cannot bind her with apologies offered too late. His tactics dissolve against her sovereignty. She sees through the mask of his ego and the weight of his unhealed wounds. She no longer confuses potential with reality or promises with truth. In this rebirth, she steps into her divine feminine power, not the fragile femininity defined by compliance, but the fierce, radiant energy that radiates from within. She no longer carries the fear of abandonment, because she knows she cannot abandon herself. She no longer fears rejection, because she no longer rejects her own worth. She no longer fears being unseen, because she sees herself fully. The man's regret becomes, paradoxically, her final confirmation. It proves what she always suspected. She was never too much. She was simply with someone incapable of enough. His grief is the mirror of her freedom. His longing is the shadow of her release. And as he grapples with what he lost, she rises beyond the reach of his remorse. The Stoics understood this freedom well. Seneca wrote that he is most powerful who has power over himself. And so it is with her. By mastering her emotions, by refusing to let external validation dictate her inner peace, she becomes untouchable. She moves through the world with the still confidence of someone who does not chase love, but attracts it effortlessly, because she no longer needs it to survive. This is the dark power of detachment. It transforms regret into his burden and freedom into her crown. She does not rage against him, does not seek revenge, does not even require closure. She simply lives. And in that living, in that radiant indifference, she becomes unforgettable. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.